That year the Nile came quietly, almost shyly. The water rose only a cubit or two, then retreated as if apologizing. The fields of Kenner, like hundreds of others, turned into a cracked yellow-gray desert long before the sun completed its first full circle after the inundation. On the evening of the fourth day after the water withdrew, Kenner sat beside his empty granary, watching his youngest daughter, Merritt, try to chew a dry crust of barley bread that had grown hard as wood 3 days earlier. She didn't cry. She had already forgotten how. On the fifth day the scribe from the temple of Ammon arrived. Behind him came two sturdy guards, and a thin man carrying a basket that held exactly enough grain to keep the family alive until the next flood. Only until the next one. Kenner watched as the scribe carefully drew signs on a piece of limestone. Each stroke was a day of his family's future, given away in advance. When he reached the last line, the scribe looked up. "Your mark, Kenner, son of Tahatep." Kenner slowly drew his finger across the clay, leaving a rough imprint. He could not read. But he understood that he had just sold a portion of a future he had not yet seen. 3 floods passed. 3 times the Nile came insufficiently generous. 3 times Kenner signed new pieces of limestone. The debt grew like a thick snake coiling around a tree, slowly, relentlessly, day after day. In the 4th year they came for him at night. Not with shouts, not with weapons. Just 3 short knocks at the door, the way they always came for debtors. "The state calls you, Kenner," said the eldest of the men dressed in white linen. "Your debt has grown larger than your life. Now you will work it off." His wife grabbed his hand, but Kenner gently yet firmly lifted her fingers away. "Don't," he whispered. "They'll take you too if you resist." At dawn he was already walking in a column of other debtors along the canal. Barefoot. With a rope around his right wrist, not too tight, but tight enough to remind him, "You no longer belong to yourself." They brought them to the great construction site near the new tomb of one of the pharaoh's sons. There they dragged stones, the weight of 10 grown men. They descended into quarries, where the air was thick with stone dust. They returned under the scorching sun that reflected off the white limestone so fiercely that eyes hurt even when closed. Sometimes Kenner thought of Merritt. Of how she might already have forgotten his face, or worse, remembered it, but considered him guilty that the world had become so dry. One day in the 6th year, a new governor arrived at the camp. Young. Still not hardened enough to hate the smell of sweat and despair. He walked among the men, looking at them for a long time, as if trying to understand why they were still breathing. Then he stopped in front of Kenner. "How old are you?" he asked unexpectedly. "I don't know exactly, my lord. When the Nile last came high, that was when I completed 20 full cycles." The governor was silent for a long time. Then, very quietly, almost in a whisper, "My father also didn't live to see a high flood. He too became a mark on limestone. And later, a stone in someone else's tomb." Kenner raised his eyes. For the first time in 6 years someone looked at him not as a debt, but as a human being. 3 months later, when the sun had already begun to lean toward autumn, they announced the forgiveness of part of the debts. Not all of them. Not generously, but enough for several dozen men to be allowed to return to their villages. Kenner was among them. When he came home, Merritt was already taller than him by a head. She stood at the threshold and looked at him as if trying to remember whether this was the same man who once carried her on his shoulders to the river. He dropped to his knees in the dust. "I came back," he said simply, and he wept. For the first time in 7 years, that year to the Nile was late. But this time Kenner did not go to the temple granary. He knew sometimes it is better to starve together than to live apart, paying off a debt that never ends.